What's up? I'm realizing now this is the first video I think I've made where it isn't completely dark in my room. I was able to record this earlier in the day because it was the weekend and so I just had more time, but hopefully that doesn't break anybody's immersion. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that's been floating around in my mind for a while, and I want to sort of summarize my thoughts on it because I think it's a pretty prescient topic and it's something that a lot of people around my age are going to have to figure out a way to address. And that is, in what capacity should you use AI for learning? Whether it's for self-learning or whether you're in a formal education system like university. And so, for context, I come from sort of a transitionary period when AI was getting adopted. So when I started my undergrad for the first 2 years, AI was not really on anybody's radar. Obviously, the Transformer paper, Vaswani's paper had already come out, and this is after 2020, so there was definitely a lot of progress being made in the field, but I think I started undergrad right before, or maybe sometime around within like a year or so of when GPT, the original ChatGPT dropped, which I guess, what was that, GPT 2.5, 3.5? I can't remember anymore. There's been too many models. But the point being is that for the first 2 years of my undergrad, AI was either not on people's radar or it wasn't capable enough to really handle anything technical that upper level coursework would demand. But then starting around my junior year, I think things really took off. GPT 4.0 was pretty good, and then I think there was a pretty significant leap between GPT 4.0 and then O1 Preview, if you guys remember that. I think that was their first reasoning model that they released, and that model was significantly better. It was a lot better at coding. It was a lot better at solving problems on account of the fact that it was a reasoning model, and it was just a broad step up in general. And for the first time, I thought that the AI model was actually pretty competent at solving some of the math problems that I was encountering in my class. And I'm not just taking lower level math classes either. At this point, I was taking some proof-based math classes and some upper graduate level math classes. And so it was a pretty crazy leap to go from the AI routinely messes up simple calculations, has all sorts of logical errors that no human would ever make, to it's now capable of doing proofs in my real analysis class. Usually not zero-shotting them, but with a little bit of context from Stack Exchange posts and from Math Overflow posts, and with a little bit of prodding from the user. The O1 model was pretty good at coming up with the solutions to real analysis problems, which is pretty challenging. And so I think the fact that I went through school in this transitionary period where I went through my core classes without having access to AI, and then had the latter half of my undergrad be during a time when AI was getting better and able to solve these harder problems, I think that was very advantageous for me. Obviously, everybody before me, they went through school without any AI assistance because the technology just wasn't there yet. And that has its own benefits and setbacks. Obviously, the setback is that AI can really accelerate your learning if you know how to use it properly. And it's a very powerful tool as long as you understand the limitations inherent within it. But the advantage for those people is that they really had to learn the material themselves. They had to make sure they understood it, and there were no shortcuts they could take, basically. They couldn't say, Claude one-shot my assignment, or ChatGPT one-shot this online test I have to take. Additionally, something I don't think a lot of people mention is that if you graduated with good credentials from a university in an era before AI went mainstream, then your credentials have greater, what's the word I'm looking for? Your credentials would be held in higher esteem than somebody who's graduated in the post-AI era, which is unfortunate because if you've worked hard and you really know what you're talking about and you studied and you didn't take shortcuts, the fact that people will discount your degree or not hold it in as high of esteem as somebody who graduated before AI, that's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about that. But obviously, Some people are going to take advantage of AI, they're going to cut corners, and as a result, I think it's going to diminish the overall value of a university education unless universities become very strict about preventing the use of AI, which I think going too extreme in that direction has its own concerns. So the point I'm getting at, though, is that because I'm one of these people that went through university in a transitionary period when I didn't have AI for a lot of my core classes like calculus, I didn't have it for linear algebra, differential equations, physics, all of these core classes that everybody, whether you're math, physics, or an engineer, you all have to take those classes. But then I did have it for some of these more advanced classes. I think that gives me a really unique perspective on what's the right way to use AI to learn. And so I want to talk about in two separate scenarios. The first is the scenario where you're still in school, you have a structured learning program, and you have all of the constraints that are expected of you when you're a university student. And the other scenario I want to talk about is when you are self-teaching or when you're on some sort of journey to learn something on your own, like what I'm doing with computer science on this YouTube channel. So I think I'll start with that first. And I think generally, if you're trying to learn something on your own, you have a couple advantages in that you're not constrained to a curriculum, but that's also a disadvantage because sometimes it can make it unclear where to start and what your next step should be when you're trying to learn a topic. In that respect, I think AI can be very helpful. If you're coming from a completely non-technical background and you say, I want to learn computer science, you can watch a bunch of YouTube videos, you can read a bunch of articles. They might all say different things, but what those people are saying in those videos may not be specifically curated to you and your background. But you could talk to an AI model and say, this is what the background I'm coming in with, these are all my strengths, these are all my weaknesses, this is my goal, how would you suggest I go about that? In that sense, you can use AI to personalize your study routine in a way that you would not be able to get otherwise unless you had a one-on-one tutor. That already is extremely helpful. In addition, when you're actually studying, I think it's important to use AI in the right way. And what I think is the right way is that you use it as you talk to it in a way as if you're talking to a tutor, where if you're trying to learn math, for example, and you get a tutor to help you learn math, what happens is they sit with you, they watch you do the problems. If you get stuck, you can ask them for help, and they nudge you in the right direction, but they don't give you the full answer. Nobody goes to a tutor just to have the tutor do the work for them. Well, I mean, I guess some people do, if you're like one of those rich people that has a tutor do all of your work so you can get into a good school. But at that point, you've already invalidated the whole goal of learning, so that's not what I'm talking about. If your goal is actually to learn something and become proficient in it, then you need to exercise your mental muscles and get used to those concepts yourself. And so I think the right way to use AI in that respect is you set after something, whether it's a problem set or a project or reading a section of a textbook, and you try your hardest to get as far as you can without any assistance from the AI. So read the chapter, reread the chapter, write down what you don't understand, try to figure out where the gaps in your understanding are. Same thing if you're working on a problem set. Get as far as you can with the problem. If you get stuck, try some different approaches. Maybe try some other problems. And if those problems are solvable, maybe they give you an idea of how to solve the problem you're stuck on. Regardless, think about what would you do if you didn't have the AI to help you? How would you go about trying to make it through whatever subject you've set in front of yourself? Then, if you're really stuck or you don't feel like you're making progress or you don't know how to proceed or fix something, that is when you could talk to AI about the problem. But there's the caveat that you're not telling it, provide me the solution step by step. You're talking to it like it's a tutor, right? So you say, this is the problem I'm working on. This is what I've done so far. I'm stuck. Give me a hint of what the next step is to get myself unstuck. Don't give me the full solution, just give me a hint. Exactly how it would be like if you're working with a tutor. And the AI is very good at this in my experience. Like for example, when I did my base 64 implementation yesterday, I did that almost entirely by myself, but there were one or two times when I was trying to figure something out it just kept being wrong. I didn't know what was the issue. I tried a bunch of different things, and so I went to Claude and I said, Claude, here's the exact snippet of code that's giving me trouble. I've tried this, this, and this. I'm stuck. Give me a hint on what I'm doing wrong to get me unstuck, but don't give me the full solution. Don't tell me, oh, here, let me do it for you. Just tell me the minimum amount of information I need to know to figure it out myself. And when you learn that way, when you get these tiny hints that are just enough to get you unstuck, you're doing most of the learning yourself. You get one little handout from the AI that helps you, but everything else, you're building the synaptic connections, you're building the mental muscles to solve those problems, because you're doing 95% of the work yourself. You might just need that little 5% of help to get past this period where you're stuck in. I think generally, if you use AI in that way, in a self-teaching context, it can be extremely helpful. Because previously, back in the day, especially with math, I'll give an example with math. If you didn't know how to solve a problem, or if you didn't know how to prove a theorem and you've been working at it for hours and hours, you just couldn't figure it out, you had basically two options. If you were in university, you would go to your professor's office hours, which was pretty hit or miss. Oftentimes, the professors would not really answer the questions that you were asking in a way that was helpful. Oftentimes, they either give you an explanation way over your head, or they'd go too fast, or any number of things where you go and you feel more confused after you leave than when you walked in. I know that happened to me a couple times. Your other option would be to go on Math Stack Exchange and you make a post, and then inevitably it gets marked as a duplicate. Somebody in the comments tells you you're stupid. Some person with a PhD from an Eastern European country might take pity on you and give you an answer, but oftentimes using Math Stack Exchange is pretty painful. You'd have to go through a lot of being called names. A lot of people would insinuate that you're dumb or that you're not trying hard enough, and it was just a really unpleasant experience overall. The nice thing about using AI as your tutor is that it's never going to tell you you're stupid. It's never going to mark your question as duplicate. It's infinitely patient, which is probably one of its best aspects. I think that about covers how I think you should use AI in a self-studying context. Obviously, there's a broad topic of things you could choose to self-study, but I'm mainly talking from the perspective of something within the domain of math, physics, engineering, computer science. Now, the next area I want to discuss is for if you're a university student. So if you're in school right now, I'm mainly talking about if you're an undergraduate right now, because if you're a graduate student like me, then you already kind of know how to work and get things done without AI because you spent a decent amount of your schooling in undergraduate not having AI as a resource available to you. So I'm talking to people that are probably sophomores, freshmen, and juniors right now that have essentially had AI available to them their entire college experience. I think right off the bat, the first thing you should do is never just let AI zero-shot your assignments or take tests for you or things like that. When you do that, you're just completely robbing yourself of the chance to get an education and to actually learn these things. And you might think that sounds corny, but you have to understand, if you are going to school and you're paying tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to school, it's no longer sufficient just to get a degree. A degree is no longer a guarantee of a six-figure job. You have to actually have competence associated with that degree. And with an increasingly competitive job market and offshoring jobs and some jobs being replaced by AI, you would have to be insanely stupid to just cheat your way through college and not expect that to backfire on you. You might graduate with like a 4.0 GPA because ChatGPT did all of your assignments, but once you actually get into a job that requires the technical skills that you were supposed to have learned during your education, you're cooked because you didn't learn anything and the AI did everything for you. And if you're only capable when you have the AI to help you, why would the company bother hiring you in the first place? They're just going to pay for more token credits for a senior engineer. because the senior engineer is going to be more proficient with the AI usage anyway. So why would they hire you when they could probably save thousands of dollars a year and just turn some senior or mid-level engineer into someone even more productive? So that's step number one. Don't let it just do stuff for you absentmindedly. That's insanely stupid on a huge number of levels. The next thing is that you kind of want to take the same student tutor approach that I talked about in the self-learning phase. There's two groups of people. Some people say you shouldn't use AI at all. Some people use AI way too much. I think you should consider AI in the same way that you consider any other technology, where you shouldn't be a Luddite and just say, oh, I never want to use AI. You have an irrational dislike of using AI. That's not constructive. And it's going to place you behind. I think the right way to do it is to use it ethically and to use it in a way that is maximizing your learning, not just maximizing the points you're getting on assignments. And I recognize that there's a conflict of interest there, where you need to do well academically, you need to get good grades, and so there is an incentive, not an explicit incentive, but an implicit incentive by the university system for people to use AI to cheat because they need to get good results on their exams and on their assignments. However, the primary goal of university, and I didn't realize this until I was several years into school, the primary goal should be you learning stuff. Having good grades and having the accolade and all of those things, that's nice. But at the end of the day, once you get your first job, what's going to matter is, are you competent at what you're supposed to know how to do? Are you proficient at the things that job expects of you? And are you going to be able to get shit done? At the end of the day, once you are in the job market for long enough, they're going to care less and less about your GPA, and they're going to care more and more about your work experience. And the quality of your work experience is going to be determined by how good you are at your job. And how good you are at your job, how competent and confident you are at what you do, will be determined by how much you learned in your education. And if you didn't learn anything in your education because you were cheating the whole time, then you're really setting yourself up for failure. You're going to get the transient benefit of having good grades, but as soon as you come into contact with the real world, you're going to realize how much you screwed yourself over by not learning things the right way. And so I think the best way to use AI if you're in school is, you should use it, to be honest, if it's applicable. Obviously, don't use it if it's not applicable to your classes, but I think if you're doing anything math, computer science, physics related, where there are a lot of problems that the AI has probably seen tons of times in its training data, it can be a very helpful tool to help you learn concepts and to solve problems. But the primary driver of you doing all those things still needs to be yourself. You still need to be doing most of the work, and you should only use the AI to get yourself unstuck. If you aren't doing most of the work by trying and struggling and failing and trying again, then you might see the solution that the AI spits out to you and say, oh, okay, that makes sense. But by the time you actually have to do it on the test, when you can't ask ChatGPT or Claude, you're not going to know how to do it. Even though you understood every solution that you saw, it's not going to go to your permanent memory because you didn't exercise your brain by figuring out the problem yourself. You looked at it for 5 minutes, said it was too hard, and then you used your get out of jail free card, which might have helped you on the assignment and it might have saved you a lot of time. But what happened in the process is that you didn't really learn. And so as a result, when you have something like an exam that is meant to evaluate whether or not you learn the material, it's going to, the lack of learning that you had is going to be reflected in the score that you get. And so figure out whatever your current major is, whatever it is you're studying, figure out what that good medium point is of using AI when it's helpful to help you get unstuck so you're not working on the same problem for 8 hours, but also not letting it do all of your work for you. I think if you're able to figure that out, and if you're intellectually honest with yourself, and you're really pushing yourself academically, and you're not using it as a get out of jail free card, then you're going to have a much easier experience in school than many people did in the past. Because many people, if they didn't get something, your option was read the textbook. That doesn't make sense. Go talk to your professor. That doesn't make sense. You're screwed. and maybe you'll figure it out eventually, but there's such a wealth of resources on the internet right now, in addition to AI, that if you're driven and you're disciplined and you're able to suffer through being stuck and confused for a while, then it's never been easier to learn things, because all the resources are out there. You just have to use them ethically, and you have to have the wherewithal and the discipline to still put in hard work, even when there's so many of these easy cop-outs that you can choose to use. So I hope if you're someone who's an undergraduate right now, you take heed of what I've said. It's probably pretty tough for you, unfortunately, because I would imagine, just from what I've seen, almost everybody is using AI in your classes. It's probably a super majority, like 90%. Some of them are it's a stratified level of use, right? Like some of them are just cheating on everything. Some of them are using it in the way that I described. But I promise you, even if your class average on the exam was like a 90 because everybody's using AI, please at least try to learn the content yourself, because when you don't learn it yourself, you're really doing yourself a disservice later on down the road. So stop and think about it. If you're still in school, think about, what is the purpose of you being in school? Is it to get a degree and a certification? Maybe that's all you need out of it, but at the end of the day, the whole reason of getting that certification was that it was supposed to represent that you are competent and you know what you're doing. That's harder to prove now in the age of AI, so you really need to make sure that you're learning this stuff yourself, because pretty soon, having a college degree, I don't think is going to be as strong as it used to in helping you to secure a job. It's a tough situation to be in, unfortunately, and it's no fault of your own, but you have to play the cards you're dealt, and I think what I've described in this video is the best way to do that. So I hope, if you're watching this video, I hope you find it helpful, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you disagree? I especially want to hear from people that have been in school for a duration of time when AI was always available, because I don't know what it's like for those groups of people. What is it like when you've had this option available to you the entire time? Are you still are you still seeing people in classes that are genuinely working through the problems themselves, or is it just rampant? Because I'm pretty sure from what I saw, by the time I was a senior, it looked like it was pretty rampant. And so that's a bad prognosis for higher education, but we'll just have to see how it shakes out. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think, and have a good one.